Hey, you know, the right forearm is a curious, what you would call joint segment. It's in between two joints, the elbow and the wrist, so you'd call it a segment. Now, what are we supposed to do with this during the downswing and through impact? Well, there's a lot of teachers out there that will tell you it's supposed to pronate like this, turning from palm out to palm in or palm up to palm down. My short answer to this question would be, it depends. It actually depends on a few other factors in your swing and matching them up with what you do with your forearm. Let's talk about that right after this. Hey, this is Steve with HitItLonger.com. I continue on my journey to hit the ball longer and straighter than I ever have before, and I hope to help you do the same. All right, so again, conventional wisdom would tell you the forearm is supposed to pronate, which means turn over, as you go through and into impact, but it's really not that simple. Let's look at it this way from the beginning of the swing. I'm an advocate of a model where the forearm never supinates or turns this way in the backswing at all. And you can see how this would work. Sure, my left forearm will turn 90 degrees as I cock the wrist, but you see my right wrist, to conform to that wrist cock, I just need to extend the wrist. I don't need to rotate the forearm at all. My forearm is totally still. So I can absolutely have a working model where the right forearm stays the same, and I just cock the wrist and I start to flex the elbow, and I can get pretty far with just those two bending actions. And of course, I would just have to replace, theoretically, what I took out in the backswing by straightening the elbow and straightening the wrist. And I'm going to come right back with my arm bone and the club face right back to where it started from. Now, this in fact would require, all that I would have to do to make this now work through the ball is to make sure that I flap the club head past the wrist into flexion, and then I can get the club face to square up. You see, if I didn't, so here's my no-supinate position. If I hold on to that wrist, I'm going to leave the face open. So there has to be some kind of flapping back to neutral of the wrist, which of course will continue into a flex position. And that model will work great on one condition, and that is that you're trying for a neutral club path. That would mean that the club path comes in on a curve from the inside, straightens up, and then curves back to the inside again. If you can get a fairly neutral club path, you can use this method and it'll hit the ball very, very straight, and you won't have to supinate through the impact zone at all. You'll just be doing this, and maybe at the very end of the follow through, as the left elbow breaks and throw it over the shoulder, you might have to turn the forearm over then, but that's not has anything to do with the impact zone. Now, another thing this depends on, which you have to match this up to, now if you were applying a draw from the inside, you would have to match up forearm rotation to the path. So if I'm coming, and again, I've used my flap the wrist, bend the elbow, no rotation of the forearm going back here. But if I swing this thing out to the right and I just flap the wrist, I'm going to hit a push. So I'm going to have to introduce some of this kind of top spin tennis stroke rolling or supinating of the forearm in order to get the club face to be close to its path, and therefore applying a top spin or a hook spin in this case. Let's look at what that might look like in slow motion here. Okay, so there's a bit of a draw from the inside. You can see in that replay and the follow through as I shoot the club out across the line a little to right field, that you see the right forearm is definitely crossing over the left. And in order to get that ball drawing, I need to introduce some supinating or turning over of the forearm. Now, another instance that you would have to apply more pronation in the right forearm to make the shot work consistently would be if this end of the stick is not arcing very well. So if you're somebody who kind of drops it down and then goes out late, well, your club is not turning the corner on time. It's heading out almost in a linear fashion for too long. It might turn the corner way out here somewhere, but that's not helping the club come on around and catch up. And so if you're this way coming into it, shoving the handle kind of forward and out away from you, you're in a kind of a stuck position. You're definitely going to have to introduce a lot of forearm rotation. This can bite you in the butt. You probably want to address this over the long term, but certainly to get that ball on line as consistent as you can, you will have to introduce more forearm rotation this way. Now, you could actually, and there's a lot of people in the Hall of Fame who played with the opposite, almost a screwball release. You could say, let's say something like this is my backswing, and I'm going to externally rotate my upper arm segment, and it actually sends the right forearm into supination, or turning this way a little bit. It's not the forearm by itself. It's an act of the, you see the elbow in and out and in and out. That's this bone here rotating at the rotator cuff, and it's acting as a supinating action. And I can stay in this supinating position. So I'm not coming back to neutral. I'm coming back with a more of a pinky leading pronated position. And I can still flap this way, especially if my hand path is beautifully around to the left, and potentially my club path is around to the left. I could play this way, and who would be in this category? Somebody like a David Duval, it could be a Brooks Koepka. These guys don't have quite as much of this in the swing. They can actually come through almost feeling a little bit more of a karate chop action this way. See how the pinky side of the hand stays in the lead, and as you flap, you're actually a little bit rotated this way with the forearm going through the impact zone. Now, the predominant shot here would be straight to a slight fade, and so you definitely would want to be playing this a little bit from outside to in. Now that might look something like this. So looking back at that one in slow motion, you can definitely see how, with the assistance of maybe a little bit more rotation and the hand path exiting on a beautiful curve this way, I can actually go into a little bit more of a karate chop style flick of the wrist this way, like I'm kind of skipping a rock or throwing a screwball if I'm throwing submarine style. So it's a little bit more of this karate chop feel. Now you're only going to be able to get away with that with the correct matchup. You can't do this and hold the wrist and try to lag the club. You have to do this and throw the crap out of it from the top of the swing. You'll also have to make sure that your hand path is cracking around up and left through the impact zone too, to get that kick of the club head coming around and squaring up. Furthermore, you might have to match it up with a little bit of an outside in path, as you might tend to leave the face a little open to that path. Now, what makes this more intriguing is out on the course, you might be varying, a good golfer might be varying the amount of pronation they're doing from shot to shot, depending on the wind and the lie and what shot is called for into the green or off the tee. So what you really want to do is practice some shots doing both styles, both coming with this rock skip karate chop action and with the pronation feel and everything in between. You kind of want to experiment with it because the versatility you're going to learn from this, the learning of variability and adapting to variability, is going to help you quite a bit out on the course to control your shots better and possibly get you out of trouble better too. But again, the stock model that I would advocate would be cock the wrist, flex the elbow. I have kept the forearm kind of square to the arc here. And really about the only thing that's going to change here is I might do a little bit of an internal, kind of a pronating internal rotation at the upper arm that I reverse the beginning of the downswing. But that's more of this arm segment turning in and out, not really the forearm itself. And then if I just put back what I took out in the backswing, I should be able to square that up. But remember, it's path dependent, handle path dependent, and depends on what kind of curve you're trying to put on the golf ball. So be aware of this, put some awareness into shots and what you're doing with the forearm, play with it, experiment with it, hit some different shots and figure out, get some awareness of what that forearm's doing so that when you have to hit a shot under pressure, you can pull it off nicely. Hey, I hope this tip will clear up a little bit of mystery or confusion you might have on what you're supposed to do with your forearms going through the shot. Thanks for watching my channel. I hope you will support me by heading over to hititlonger.com. And as usual, I'll either see you in the next video or I'll see you longer and straighter down the fairway. Everybody take good care.